Welcome to Rocket Ship, the home of epic React Native content. I'm Simon Grimm, creator of Galaxies.dev, and today's guest is kind of a special guest. It is Jamon Holmgren. Probably everyone from the React Native community should know that name. Jamon, thanks for taking the time.
Hey Simon, thanks for having me on your show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, so for folks who don't know you, Jamon is the co-founder of Infinite Red, the React Native experts, the best people you can get. Jamon is also the co-host of React Native Radio. So for everyone coming from React Native Radio, make sure you subscribe here as well.
Yes,
I cover
please
React
do.
Native as well.
Yes.
And you have over 30 years of coding experience. That's what your website says. So you almost have more coding experience than my age, which makes me a bit nervous.
Yeah, don't feel too bad. I mean, I started when I was like 11, 12, in that range. And, but yeah, I've been coding ever since. Like there's no period of time in that time that I wasn't coding.
I mean, a great hint to how long you've been coding is your personal website, which is like in QBasic or something.
I don't know. So I was like complaining online, hey, I want to build my website in something that's not just normal, Next or like even like Rails or
Next,
yeah. And someone was like, do it in QBasic, you coward. And I was like, okay, challenge accepted. And somehow it's running right now.
So for everyone, don't be worried. We're not talking about QBasic today. We're talking about React Native. I think we have a pretty great chance because Jamon, you're the CE. What is your title?
CTO technically. Yeah, CTO. We wear a lot of hats, but yeah, technically CTO.
Right. So I would love to talk about like React Native at scale at bigger companies, a bit about open source, but also more specifically about like the job market as well, which is kind of a challenge for many people right now. So many interesting topics. Maybe we get started with Infinite Red. We also had two other folks from Infinite Red already on the podcast. Gant was here. That was a fun. And we had, I always forget your name. I'm so sorry. I met you at the app.js and you're commenting on every tweet. Frank.
Yes.
Sorry. Frank Kelly's. Right.
Yeah.
Those were great episodes as well. But I would love to know from you, Infinite Red is completely focused on React Native. And I feel like you made that switch pretty early. So could you describe like why Infinite Red settled very early on React Native? Because we know like people from 2 years ago say React Native sucked. And you like said, I don't know, 6 years ago, hey, let's do this agency with React Native.
Yeah,
why?
It was
what
actually,
did you see back then?
It was actually over 9 years ago now, which is wild. We did a bunch of different things, and actually in 2015 I had a company that was about size like 12 people ish, 13 somewhere in there, and then my co-founders, Todd and Gant, as well as Ken, who was an original co-founder, had a couple of companies as well, and they were consulting companies, and we actually met through open source. So we were actually building some open source together. All four of us, as well as some others like Mark Rickert and some others that were at the company. And we were doing iOS open source because I was doing like iOS, iPhone, iPad. This was relatively new-ish back then, I think I started in 2011, 2012, and I had maybe done, like 3 years of iPhone development, iOS development, and native development. And then I've told this story many times about how we merged and stuff, and it's kind of a fun story, but we ended up merging these companies together into the new Infinite Red. And when that happened, we also took a hard look at the technologies that we were doing. And earlier that year in 2015, Facebook had released React Native, and we had been getting, in that time, people don't probably remember, but like prior to that, it was mostly like build me an iPhone app. Like an app meant iPhone, pretty much, at least in the US. I don't know about, outside the US, but we were in the US. So it was iPhone. And then people started saying, I also want Android. I want Android with my iPhone, and we'd start building it in native. And it was, like kind of felt like a waste, like building it twice. Right. And so we started looking around, and React Native had been released. But it was iOS only at first, and then
Mm.
September of 2015 they released the Android version. And when the Android version came out, Todd, our my co-founder, he went and took a look at it. He did a bunch of work, kind of like checking it out, and he came back and said, "Guys, it's pretty good. This is actually pretty good, and I feel like this is going to take off." And it was a great call. It was a great call. So we actually had two native apps like queued up to start when our merge finished in October of 2015. We went back to those clients that we had already told we were going to be doing native. We said, we don't want to do native. We want to do React Native. And they're like, what's that? And so we had to explain what React Native was. And they both agreed. And so Gant actually led one of those projects. And then we had another guy named Steve Kellock who did the other one. And we ran them in parallel and had a great experience, way better than we expected, even though it was early days, but keep in mind, our whole team knew like native, like we knew native development. So when there were issues, we could dive right down into the code and figure out what was going on. And then from there, we were able to like build Ignite, our open source, starter kit and stuff like that. And then the rest is history. As far as like how we settled on just doing React Native, at first we were doing like Ember and some other web technologies, and we kind of ported back like, okay, if we're doing React Native, we should probably do React. So we started doing React, and kind of like thinking through our process. We started doing Elixir, we're still doing Rails, things like that. And over time though, React Native just continued to grow, and we were like converting like backend devs into React Native developers kind of like constantly until our backend team was very small. And eventually we admitted, you know what, this is where we have traction. Let's focus. Let's just do this. Because we don't intend to be huge. We're 30 people now. Like max size is probably going to be 35 or 40, something like that. And that's going to probably take years because we hire very slowly. So yeah, we were just like, okay, we're just doing React Native.
When was that? Was it like a couple of years later?
The transformation didn't totally finish until about 2020, which is later than people think probably. But by that point we were already doing 90 some percent. And so I would say, well, it was probably about 2018 that we stopped doing Elixir as backend, and we kind of like, so like the 18 to 20 range was sort of the transition, because you still have projects going on and whatnot. You have to kind of finish up. But yeah, that was like 3 years into our thing. So but I mean, even at the very beginning, most of our projects were already React Native, and it just kind of like all the other stuff just kind of went to zero.
So you were a native iOS dev, and you said your co-founder Todd, he saw something in React Native. Do you still remember like what he saw in it at that point? And also, in the same note, like why did you enjoy it more? Because I think at that point, iOS development, there was at that point already Swift around, I think. So it wasn't too bad. Like I was also writing Swift code, and I kind of enjoyed it back then. So
yeah,
what made you think like, this React Native is actually better than writing my good old Swift?
Right. Just the cross-platform capabilities. It was a step backwards at the time for iOS, and it was a huge step forward for Android for us, for the experience. And the net was really good value for the client. It was like, okay, we can build it once and it'll be a good experience for the client. And it felt like, we could kind of drive a stake in the ground too, because this was like a new technology that felt like it was going to take off. So there was a bit of that for sure. We liked, like anybody else, we had the misconception at first that it was a web view, like another sort of PhoneGap or Cordova.
Another Cordova.
Yeah, right. And I think that's, the very first thing that Todd went to look at is like, oh no, these are like native views. They're like making UI views and Android layout and Android views and whatnot. So that was like, oh, okay, well, that's cool. Like, how's the performance? How's the, and it was like, this is good enough. Like, this is pretty good. Now we went into it like, okay, we would consider this a success if we could get 50% code reuse, like 50%. And we were actually able to get in the very first projects far more. It was probably like 75, 80%. And those were in the early days. Nowadays we have 95%, even 100% in some cases, code reuse. So, that's like it's like the biggest like compelling thing. If React Native can be good, you know, it doesn't have to be like amazing, but if it can be good in everything and then get like the cross-platform stuff really nailed, you know, that's a huge like business value win. And I think it's better than good in a lot of cases.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, you know, like anything, like any technology, there's trade-offs.
Yeah, I mean, I was a big fan of Capacitor and Cordova and
Yeah,
Ionic in the past, and I think there's a market for that as well.
right.
And I think Ionic had a special chance.
Mm-hmm.
I think there was like they were released pretty much at the same time, like React Native, and they were kind of ahead for a while, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know, somewhere along the way, React Native took over, or it was because like initially they had like this Angular focus, and React kind of won on the web. So
React has been huge for React Native. If it weren't for React, I don't know if React Native, it would be kind of in the same level as maybe like a Flutter or, you know, something else, just because
oh yeah,
by itself, it's a pretty compelling technology, but with a back or with a front end web team that's already doing React, it's extremely compelling.
yeah. And you said something about the value it brings to business, which
Yeah.
brings me to another topic I wanted to pick up with you, because recently I had a tweet. There was an honest tweet asking like why the best companies in the world use React Native. I was just curious because I get a lot of also like not hate but comments from Flutter people
Yeah.
sometimes. They're like, oh, Flutter is so good, try Flutter, it's so good, the apps are so good. And I'm always like, where are the good apps? I can't find the good Flutter apps. So I was honestly asking this, and I got a lot of replies. And you also took the time to quote me and give a lot of insight into that. So I just want to pick up on that again. If you could like share a bit, because you actually have what I'm lacking, the practical experience from working with like the biggest companies in the world and consulting them. So what do
Yeah.
you think? Like, why is it that the best companies just use React Native? I mean, it's the truth.
Yeah.
There are outliers like BMW from Germany is using Flutter. Congratulations, but
Yeah.
yeah, beyond
Yeah.
that, it's
I mean, you know, I want to start off by saying Flutter has some real positives. Like it really does. They legitimately get some things very right that that I think they do better than React Native. And I think
they have out of the box components. I love them.
that is absolutely they do. And you know, they have things like well, just the general like developer experience. Things like upgrades have never been really an issue. Like upgrades are the biggest pain point, or one of the biggest pain points.
And just on that note, the Flutter community, just like when we record this, they just made an effort to fork Flutter.
I know,
which is
yeah.
Interesting. I don't know what it brings to Flutter, but it shows that the community is definitely still active.
Yeah, and I think that actually that fork brings me to my biggest point around React Native. The community for React Native, when I talk to clients and they're like, you know, considering different things, the thing that concerns them about Flutter is it's pretty much just Google. Now, Flutter developers would look at you and say, no, it's not. Well, the fork is happening because it's just Google. That's why it's happening. And on the React Native side, I mean, for a fair amount of time, a guy from Microsoft was the one releasing React Native. I mean, talking years, you know, like Lorenzo Kelset from, you know, worked at Microsoft, and he was like the one releasing React Native, which is supposedly a meta thing. Amazon has hundreds, and I mean close to thousands, I don't know, like of React Native developers. Like they have enough that they did an internal conference at Amazon that was bigger than most of the React Native conferences that are public, you know. And my co-founder Gant went to talk to them, you know, like gave a talk there at Amazon, you know, like that was going on. So you have, you know, when you think of kind of the big, well, what I think of as the big five, maybe there's, you know, it's kind of changed, but you know, you have Google, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, and Meta. And of those, Google, which owns Android, and Apple, which owns iOS, are the only two that haven't fully invested and fully bought in to React Native. That the two that own the other platform, like the platforms we're targeting. So the other three biggest are like, we're all in, not to mention all the other ones that are kind of next here. So when people are looking at it, they're like, okay, I could go with Flutter. That's 1 out of the 5, right? I could build it in Swift and Kotlin. Okay, that's, like 2 out of the 5, but I have to build it twice. I could do it in a, Ionic. Capacitor is pretty good. Like, it's pretty good overall. It's much better than what you remember. But even that, like, there's some downsides, and it's tougher to maybe build some experiences. Debatable, but it is. And so, like, those are the kind of decisions that people are kind of thinking through. And especially if a company is already using React, which is a vast number, why would you go to Flutter, which uses Dart and like nothing React? Or why would you build in native? Like, you can actually get people to be productive fairly early if they're already a React developer. So I think those things have all kind of come together to make it so that React Native itself is quite popular. And actually, the things that Flutter gets really, really right, I give them all the credit in the world. But React Native is not that far behind. And with the new architecture, it's starting to catch up. And I think especially with the smaller like set of like contributors to Flutter, eventually I think React Native, in my opinion, it's kind of inevitable that React Native is going to exceed even in those things.
Yeah, I mean, from the numbers from the surveys over the last years, it constantly looked like Flutter is surpassing React Native, and it kind of did in most surveys. So I was always curious, how is that possible? While like all the companies, we know it, that all these companies use React Native, and then we have the surveys, and like, there's sort of a disconnect. Did you ever figure out what's going on?
I have theories. I don't know.
Theories. That's good.
I have theories. My theory is that within the US, React Native is pretty much dominant. Outside the US, some countries, React Native does very well, and it really corresponds to where iOS is dominant. In Germany, is it iOS or Android, or kind of a split? I actually don't know.
It's kind of a split. I use iOS, my brother Android. We can't agree.
That's funny. Yeah. Most of the time, one of them will win because there's sort of network effects for like my whole family uses iOS, like not just my 4 kids and, and my wife and stuff, but actually like my mother-in-law does, not my father-in-law. He still uses like a flip phone. My dad and mom do, my siblings almost all do. So there's network effects of having an iPhone, and there's also network effects of having an Android. And so usually that takes over in a country. And Android has a greater range of lower end devices. So often in emerging economies, it's more popular because of that. And so because of that, you have a massive number of Android users out there, as everybody knows. And Flutter tends to do pretty well on Android. React Native is pretty good on Android. It's very good on iOS. And so, that's kind of where you look at it. But like it or not, and I know you have an international audience, I'm not saying this is fair, but like it or not, the US still has a disproportionate impact on a lot of tech. And because of that, I think the fact that we're more iOS, I think has an impact even on React Native versus Flutter. Anyway, that's a theory. Lots of Flutter developers out there, but maybe a lot of them are more indie, in other countries, in developing countries, whatnot. So sheer number of developers doesn't always reflect what's going on. And it could be a lot of, just like hobby projects and stuff like that too.
Yeah, I was also at the last App.js. I was talking to Aman from the Expo team. He came from India, and he firsthand told me that Google is putting a lot of money into like the education in India and like getting the people who are in university and teaching them Flutter. So it's a smart move to raise a generation of Flutter developers.
100%. I mean, the whole reason why why Poland is like full of React Native developers is because all their universities teach it. And so, and of course in the US, we struggle a little bit with that sort of coordination.
They also have the advantage. I think they learn C++ as well there in university, and so they're going to benefit from the new architecture and all the good stuff.
All of those things are super important. I actually am on the tech advisory committee for the college that I dropped out of.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I dropped out of this college, and somehow I ended up actually chairman of their tech advisory committee. So I went up there a couple of weeks ago to, it's like about a 40-minute drive up to the city. And I just, I was, they're asking questions because they're developing their computer science degree and the curriculum and all that stuff. And which is a relatively new thing there. And I told them like React Native, like think about it because that's a good way to get into this industry, and there's a lot of companies that use it. So maybe I can start making a dent there. I don't know.
That's so cool. Yeah, I was always thinking about like helping my university here as well, but I also was there just like 3 years, the minimum, and then I had better things to do.
Okay, yeah. Isn't it free in Germany? Like you can just go to university for free, or am I misremembering that?
I think I paid some. They change it like every 4 years. They change
but it's
something.
not
I
like
don't know what's the current. It's not expensive. No,
yeah, it's not. You come out of there with 200,000 in debt, like
no,
we do here.
You can get some. You might have a bit of debt, but it's not like in the United States. I think you have a way worse scenario where people have like huge debt going into the job market.
Yeah. I think if I were to go if I were to go back, I had actually taken a couple of years of German in high school. And if I were to go back and talk to Jamon in high school, I would have been like, go to Germany and get a degree in Germany, learn German fully, like my German's so horrible now.
I heard you talked to Marco Savi, who's from Austria.
It's so bad, wasn't it? It's funny. In my head, I can speak German fairly well. As soon as I get in front of a German speaker, I'm just absolutely terrible. I cannot say anything. But no, I mean, like, I think if I lived there for 6 months, I'd be relatively able to speak.
Probably, yeah.
I mean, and yeah, so that would have been cool. Like, right? Like, go there for 4 years, like, get a CS degree somewhere. They, at the time, I mean, this was 2000. Like at the time, I think they took U.S. people, exchange or whatever you call them, and you didn't have to pay much. And I would have come away with a degree in German and all these contacts and everything in Europe. It would have been great. But that's not the route I took. I went to a local college and I dropped out, and then I went and worked construction.
I mean, it kind of worked out for you as well, right?
Yeah. I took the long way around, but you always think about stuff like that.
Okay, how do I steer us back?
This is common when you interview me.
You talked about the 5 big companies involved, and from those you said Meta, Amazon. Mm-hmm. They're all invested in React Native, and I'm curious. Like you at Infinite Red as well, you have the Ignite Boilerplate. We can talk about that as well a bit later, and you have Reactotron. So you're investing in open source. Why do you think like these other really, really big companies also all invest into open source, like Microsoft and Amazon? They don't have to, right?
Right. And I think for many years it was actually a little bit like, why would we do that? Like Microsoft wasn't into it. They thought open source was, communism or something. And Amazon just had not a lot of interest as well. And Meta was famously not very like open source friendly, but they did change. There was sort of this big like change of heart. And I think it was because a lot of them, their incentives changed because they were able to move toward a system where you weren't just selling the software directly. Like, how VS Code is free. But like Visual Studio used to have to pay for, I'm pretty sure. And you have to buy it. Like I never did.
Visual Studio was really expensive. For C++.
Right. Yeah. I don't know, like that was kind of how they made their money. So why give it away? Right. But they changed it to more services. I think the internet helped change that too, because there were more services available to sell, servers and whatnot. And so I think that opened them up. The incentives changed, the money changed, to allow them to be that. And I know for Meta, like, they, obviously created React, which was really their biggest, it still is their biggest, open source project that has ever been. And they've had a few others that have done well as well. And Zuckerberg has even talked about this, how like these open source projects have actually, having others contribute to them have has helped them develop their products more quickly because they get bugs fixed and others contributing to these things, and they get all the benefits of that for free. Obviously, they're giving away their own engineering for free as well, so it's a bit of an exchange there. But it tends to work out. At least, open source sustainability is a very difficult topic. We could do a whole podcast episode just on that. But that's my theory, is that the incentives changed, and it even Zuckerberg was talking about how they're open sourcing their AI LLM model, and hardly anybody else is doing that. And he's like, we need it to be good. We need to have people using this, and becoming the standard that people use is useful to us as well, because it helps us build all the products that we're trying to build. So yeah, I don't know. That was sort of a thought there.
So why are you at Infinite Red contributing to open source with something like Ignite? Did you just do it because, you made it anyway internally, so why not open source it? Was it like that?
I think it kind of goes back to the fact that all of the owners, when we met through open source, and it was sort of in our DNA, it was in our blood. And we kind of didn't really think any other way. We were building on top of open source software ourselves, and it was a way to, it was definitely, there were some benefits. Like we got some attention, we got some marketing benefit from having open source out there, and people would use Ignite to build a project and then be like, okay, I need some help, and reach out to us and we'd help them. Or they'd see something, like a Gantt talk or something like that. He's an amazing speaker. And be like, oh, this is really cool. And then reach out, and we would use it to kind of help them build. We do get the benefit of the community that helps us improve it. And, all those things. I think it's just, internally, it's also good to have a place for all of us to put our shared, our stack, and evolve it over time in a way that is kind of people are using it for us because we don't spin up projects that often. We're only 30 people. We only have 8 projects going at one time. So, and often these projects are a year now. So, you're not spinning up a ton of projects at a time. And so we're not testing it all the time. So the community's testing it, and we're evolving it as we go because of the community. So there's a lot of benefits there for us. With that said, it's been a tremendous amount of work, and we're a small team, and Frank has taken, a lot of that on in more later years. I did a fair amount of it a few years ago. Gantt, of course, created it. He was the first one to build it. Along with Steve, the other guy that was working with, alongside him. So yeah, it was just a way to kind of share our knowledge together in one spot and kind of codify that into a thing. And, there are a lot of other boilerplates out there, a lot of other starter kits out there. Even when we started, there were many. We've outlasted them all, and we're going to outlast them all. Nobody's going to keep doing their boilerplate as long as we do, because it's kind of irrational. Yeah, that's just one thing you can take to the bank. Ignite's just continually going to be there.
That's my whole business strategy. I'm just going to outlast everyone. I'm like the consistent guy. I love it. I talked before this afternoon to someone from a company, and I was like, this year I reached 100K subs on YouTube.
That's
I've
awesome.
been doing YouTube
Congrats,
for thanks. I've been doing YouTube, I think, for 10 years, mostly consistent, almost releasing every week. And there are also these newcomers that have 3 months of YouTube and doing 5 videos and reach 100K. But I'm just going to outlast everyone. I'm just here for the long game. I have the longest breath of all. I don't burn out myself. I'm not burning the candle at both ends. I'm just chilling here and putting out good stuff.
I need to tap into that, because I'm that guy that puts out 5 videos and then is like, man, this is a lot of work. I do intend to get back to my YouTube channel like everybody else does. I want to ask you, I know this is supposed to be an interview of me, but you say you don't burn out, you're consistent, things like that. Is it just your personality, or do you have structures in place that help you do that? That help you kind of keep getting back and moving through it? And how do you do the editing and stuff, which takes so long with video?
That's so cool. You should invite me to the React Native Radio.
I want to. This is your invite. This is your invite. It may not happen for a little while because we got a long backlog, but we're definitely having you on.
So very early on, I learned this as well. When I got started, I was also
Yeah.
like, oh, I have this great tutorial. I'm going to put it out today and tomorrow, and everything is out. And I'm like, oh, now I have nothing for next week. So very early on, I decided like one video per week. I tried in between like 2 videos per week, but that was really, really challenging. I also
Yeah.
like for 1 month, I did like the Casey Neistat thing. I did like a daily vlog. I don't know how I did this. I didn't have
That's
like a daughter back
wild.
then, but
Yeah.
that's really wild. Um, so right now, I really like. I know that I have one video coming out every Tuesday. I stick to it, so I
Yep.
usually have like 2, 3, 4 weeks in advance my stuff
Yep.
scheduled out. Same for the podcast. I really, I just, yeah, I mean, that helps
Yeah.
me to not put out too much content. I have so many ideas. I have like a huge backlog because people constantly, hey, could you do a tutorial on this or could you do something
Yeah.
about that? I have more ideas than I can take on. Right now, the React Native 076 and Expo SDK 52.
Mhm.
Like my whole content plan for the rest of the year is just
It's just
covering the
done.
news.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like it's writing itself.
I love
So
it. I love it. And
yeah,
I love that you have 100,000 subs on YouTube, and you have this podcast, and you continue to put out quality content. And obviously Rocket Ship. There's just so much here. I'm very impressed. It's a lot to do, Simon, for a guy that's, do you have others that work with you, or are you just doing everything yourself?
so I would say I'm doing like 95%.
Yeah.
I have a video editor. I used him more in the past.
Mhm.
Right now, I don't know.
Yeah.
I did a podcast episode with Theo earlier this year,
Yeah.
and in the end, Theo was like, "I'm editing all my videos alone. Only I can do the Theo style." And I'm like, "Huh, yeah, it's kind of true." And so from that point on, I started editing my videos again, like putting in these little memes that I know I think are funny.
I know.
Or,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, that's
Some
impressive.
videos take longer. Like some videos take longer to edit.
Yeah.
I kind of enjoy it.
Mhm.
I mean, I'm alone.
Mhm.
I'm a solo business.
Yeah.
So it's quite cool. Like,
Yeah.
I record a podcast. I also edit this myself, but
Yeah.
like my editing is probably not at the same level as like the Infinite Red React Native Radio podcast editing, because I'm more like, let's listen
overdo
to
it.
it with like 3x. If I hear something strange, I'm gonna edit it. Otherwise, yeah, it's good to go.
Todd refuses to listen at 3x. Everything is at 1x. Everything is fine tuned and dialed. He'll spend 6 hours editing one like 45-minute podcast episode. I don't know how he does it. It's wild. I don't know. Yeah, that's not me. I got to get things turned around quicker.
Me too. I got like social media posts, videos, Galaxy, answering questions.
Right.
It's a lot, but it's also fun to wear a lot of different hats.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So a lot of different cool things are also in Ignite. And I want to get back to it for a moment. I talked with Frank about it. I think at that point there was a new version.
Yeah.
So for everyone, again, Ignite is your, what do you call it? Like the battle tested boilerplate, right?
Yeah, the battle tested project boilerplate. It has there's a CLI, that command line interface where you can essentially use it to spin up your brand new app. It kind of like sets up the first, I don't know. We've heard people say it saves them about 2 to 4 weeks off the front end of the project. It also does some things like you just don't really have to think about stuff like folder structure and your kind of initial stack. It's not going to be latest and greatest, bleeding edge, everything like whatever was just announced on Twitter last week. Like, it's never going to be that. In fact, it's probably 1 year behind in those types of things ish. Like, we just released Expo router experimental support, not even like but there's a very good reason for that. We won't put something into Ignite unless we've used it on a full project or 2 or 3 for clients and shipped it. Like, this works. We know it works. And because of that, everything in Ignite you can kind of take to the bank. Like, we know that this has gone to the App Store. We've used it. A project team has dealt with the bugs. We know what they are. It's kind of, inside and out. It's good. that means it does move a little slower, and some people will be like, hey, why aren't you using X, Y, or Z? And it's like, well, we are, but we're using it on a project. Like we're innovating in a project, and then we'll bring that back. And so that's kind of the big thing. There's also things like component generators and stuff like that. A little bit less important now that we have like AI coding assistants and stuff, but back before that was really helpful, and some people still really love it, and that's great. And the big community, like the big community is a big deal. We have the Ignite cookbook, which is like all these recipes for integrating different things into an Ignite project, or even just a React Native project in general. Like you don't have to use Ignite to use the Ignite cookbook. It's just, all the tutorials are written for that folder structure or whatever, but you can translate it to your own. And there's like 2,000 some React Native developers in our community Slack that talk about Ignite and whatnot. And that's been really nice because when you go ask a question, the other people are using the same stack as you, so they can answer that question most likely.
Yeah, I think calling it battle tested totally makes sense, and then your reasoning for using these technologies. Earlier this day, I talked to someone who's asking me about different things, like when you get started with React Native, you're overwhelmed by all the choices and everything you can put together. And in the end, I was like, honestly, for like 80% of the apps, it doesn't matter if you use Zustand or if you use Yotai or if you use MobX or whatever state library Jamon invented 5 years ago. It's like,
okay, that hits a little close to home.
You're probably just gonna reach your goal the same, right? So this tech stack here is definitely cool. I'm just curious about your UI library. I haven't seen it here. What styling library do you use at like Ignite or Infinite Red, and why is it better than everything else on that?
It's kind of interesting because we will be strangely unopinionated about kind of important things, but there's a big reason why. And actually, we're de-opinionating in the latest Ignite 10 or Ignite X on state management. Because MobX State Tree, I'm one of the maintainers. The other one now works for us, Tyler Williams. He just joined us. And it's a great system. I love it. Most of the people at Infinite Red would choose it if they could. With that said, that along with things like how do you fetch data? Are you using like React Query or like Apollo or all these other options? And something like the UI component library on the front end, those things tend to be more driven by the fact that we're a consultancy and we go into a context that has maybe things already picked out. Like they're already working with some state management. They're using Redux or RTK, or they're using Zustand, or they're using something along those lines. And there really isn't a lot of like appeal to us coming in and saying, no, you should use this different thing in, you're using this in React and now let's go use something else in React Native. Let's just use the same thing. Similar thing for the UI front end part of it. So what Ignite ships with is still useful. But it's a very flexible component system that is a little more bare bones compared to a lot of them. But has some capabilities built in. You can certainly build out, we've done it many, many times. You can build out custom apps. It's based on maximum flexibility, so you can build the maximum number of designs, because we'll get designs from different clients and they'll have way different things. Let's say you're using something like UI Kitten, which is a good like component system. Your designer had better be thinking of UI Kitten when they start designing. Like they should. And we've been in situations where we've used UI Kitten with a design that's not designed for it. It's not that great of an experience, unfortunately. Where Ignite's component system is never going to be a bad experience for that. It's always going to work well. You don't get as much of a boost because it's not bringing you as much stuff, but it's very flexible. And then if you have your own, you're bringing your own, or you want to use something like Native Wind or something like that, do it. No problem. It's not that hard to pull it out because it's like a folder with, 15 files in it or something. Like that's it. You remove it, you bring in your own stuff, and you move on. And so from my standpoint, that is sort of the best of all worlds, where you have the maximum flexibility, but you do have tools if you just want to go kind of the Ignite way.
On that note, have you tried Native Wind lately?
Not lately. I've been keeping an eye on it, and certainly, Tailwind in general has been a massive deal, and I have a lot of, I guess, a lot of respect for it, and I think that like a lot of people love it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm curious to see how it if it brings like a bunch of web developers into React Native. We're gonna have to see.
I wonder if at some point, like Tailwind will get so embedded into like web culture that eventually they'll be like, let's just add this to CSS. Like there will be some baked in Tailwind classes, maybe with a prefix or something, but they're actually in the browser. Like the browser knows how to style Tailwind.
That would be wild. Yeah.
Wouldn't that be? I mean, like 10 years from now, could that happen? Maybe. I don't know.
Maybe. Yeah. Why not? I mean, Evan Bacon was also asking about making this like the standard for new Expo applications. So
I don't think I don't think that should happen.
Nah, I don't
just
think
because
so
it's not. I mean, if it was 95% of projects, then yeah, for sure. Like let's look at that. But yeah, I don't know. It's much less than 95%.
So regarding Ignite, I will put a link in the show notes. And if everyone interested in more about Ignite, also check out the episode with Frank. Frank also explained nicely what Ignite is all about. But you also have another pretty interesting open source repository, let's call it like that. So my question is, now that we got the new React Native dev tools, they work pretty nice. I also used Expo before in their new implementation. Do we still need Reactotron?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So I think there is still a place for Reactotron in our toolbox. I think that one of the things that's really nice about Reactotron is it's really lightweight, and it just pops up and kind of is out of the way, and it just gives you, it's very, very tuned for React Native apps. Like it's very tuned for that. Now there's going to be some overlap with the React Native debugger, but the what we give is things like, and this is, this has been around for a long time. Again, just continuous development over time, less investment over the years than Ignite, although I think that's going to change. We're actually planning to do more investment into it. Excuse me. But what it really does is it's like what Infinite Red React Native developers want to have up while they're building. That's what it is. It's like console logs, network requests. You can inspect them, state inspection, and being able to do like snapshots. For example, if you're using Redux or MST, and we'll probably add, we're working on an Apollo plugin, and that will probably then eventually, I don't want to promise this, but turn into like a React query thing. So all of these different things allow you to like take a snapshot, and then you want to go back to that state in your app. You just click the snapshot, it restores it, like you're back. And there's a bunch of other things too, just little like quality of life things. There's the whole like ADB like reverse thing, that you have to do with Android. We just have a button for that. It'll just do it for you. There's a bunch of stuff like that. So because of that, it allows you to just kind of like fill in all the gaps that don't exist on the React Native debugger. And the question might be like, why isn't this just a plugin for the React Native debugger? Well, right now there isn't a plugin architecture. I'm not sure if there will be. And even then, we kind of like having our own sandbox to play in so that we can provide the best possible experience. And yeah, and we don't have any intentions to monetize, turn it into a product, none of that. It's literally like Reactotron is literally just, it's a tool we want to use. We want others to benefit from it as well. I saw on the React Native survey, it's something like 15% of React Native developers use Reactotron. which is, we don't have any analytics. Maybe we should. But it's, I think it should be higher, in my opinion. Not everybody should use it, but I think more people should know about it and use it, in my opinion. I think that they're going to have a better experience if they do.
So it has all the things that the new React Native DevTools have, plus a bit more, right?
It doesn't
also
have
like
all
trick async storage and stuff like that.
Yeah, it has async. It doesn't have all of those things. I think that you'll end up using both along the way. But Reactotron is the thing that you'll be using when you are just developing. And then the debugger would be when you're more debugging. That's my guess, but we'll see how it shakes out. I have talked to Meta and the React Native debugger team, and they totally think that there's a place for Reactotron. Like they're not intending to replace, all the stuff that Reactotron does.
I mean, maybe that's also an opportunity for the future. You could drop a few things that the React Native DevTools do really well, and instead focus on what makes Reactotron different from the DevTools.
Absolutely. And we can have those be you can add them back in as a plugin or something like that. There's things like custom commands, for example. Custom commands, you just in your app, in your app code, you write some code and you wrap it in a Reactotron custom command. And all of this stuff, by the way, is surrounded by an if dev. So it gets compiled out by Metro when you actually ship it to production. But during dev, there's that, and it adds a button in Reactotron. Reactotron will be like, oh, hey, here's some code. When you click that button, it runs that code. So that can be used for any arbitrary thing you want to do. You can use it for resetting your state back to a certain point, or logging out and getting to a certain point, or even with logging in. We have this button hey, I want to log in as so-and-so, or I want to log in as so-and-so. And you just click that button, and you're in. You don't have to add it to your actual iPhone app, or Android app, like some people do in development, have buttons to switch between users and stuff. Just do that in Reactotron. It's custom command, click, click, click. Super cool. And there's also other things on the way too. We've even experimented with a REPL where you could type in commands sort of in a console, and it would run it in certain contexts within the app. Hard to describe, but this is something that Rails developers know with binding.pry, if you're using pry, or something like that. So there's a lot of those types of ideas that we have. We just haven't invested the time yet, but that is something that's actually rising in importance for me for 2025, is to invest more in it.
That's so cool. I think I didn't do Reactotron a service in the past. I think I used the tools from Expo, and I kind of like their approach to the dev tools. I just recently, for example, discovered totally unrelated, Drizzle had this dev tool plugin. I didn't expect this, and you press J and it brings up you can debug and write into your SQLite, and I'm like, that is pretty wild.
That is awesome.
Just
debugging
that it,
tools
broke with the latest React Native and Expo version, and nobody's fixing it. But
who debugs the debugger?
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Could Reactotron be part of that? Would you get any benefit from being a dev tool in the Expo world?
Yeah, I mean, we've considered. In fact, we were actually the first plugin for Flipper when Flipper came out with plugins. We were the very first one, and so Reactotron, I think, maybe still works as a Flipper plugin. So we're happy to play in other people's sandboxes. We just have, it's kind of a practicality thing. It works, and we think of something, we just add it. We don't have to go through anybody else. Nobody else is breaking our stuff, other than maybe Electron, which, by the way, we're experimenting potentially with moving it over to React Native Mac OS and React Native Windows to have a desktop app that is powered by that. Yeah, I know. Yeah. So you could debug Reactotron with Reactotron. But that actually has been a challenging thing, just because Electron comes with this Node backend, which gives you all kinds of cool stuff, and React Native macOS and Windows don't have that. So you either add Node or Bun or something in the background, or you have to rewrite stuff in native code or similar. We're making progress though. That potentially could be something that we release in the future. Just a little sneak peek.
I like it. I definitely like it. So this was also already great that we talked about it, because I'm planning a video on like React Native debugging, and I
Hmm.
wasn't so sure, like,
Hmm.
do I just talk about the new stuff and what's
Yeah,
going on and what you can do with Expo? And now I'm like, I will absolutely include Reactotron,
that'd be awesome.
just to show like what's going on, and what you just said about the custom commands. I looked it up in the background. That's pretty cool.
Uh,
So definitely deserves to be part of that video.
we have done we have done such a poor job of telling people what Reactotron does. Our own people, like the newer people, often didn't even know some of the stuff it did, and it was like, oh, did you know you can do this? Did you know you can do that? Like, this is pretty cool. Like, here's an example. Let's say you get, this is very like practical thing again. Let's say you get a design for your iPhone or Android app. You can actually take a picture of that and overlay it in your simulator, with transparency that you control with Reactotron. So you turn it up and down. And so you can put that there. And as you're like coding and like saving, and it's like doing fast refresh, you're seeing the components get like lined up with the screenshot that the designer gave you. So you can like, like eyeball it to
Yeah.
get it really close. That's just one example of a tool that a lot of people don't know about that is in Reactotron.
So I think I definitely installed it. Yeah, I have the app here.
Mm-hmm.
I think what I didn't like about it, just
Mm-hmm.
to be honest, like
Yeah.
it looked so. I don't want to say anything bad, but
Oh, go for it. Go
it
for it.
looked so cheap. Like, just, yeah, some random developer did it, or like a big Linux fan did the UI. I don't know. It just didn't feel to me like a. I'm a big
I
iOS and Apple fan. Everything's rounded and shiny, and then you get
yeah.
this thing. It looks like I'm playing Command and Conquer in my in my Electron app here.
That is totally fair, and believe me, there's nothing you can say about it that I haven't said myself, like including that, the design. Yeah,
I mean, if the UI is the biggest problem, that's good news, right?
yeah, yeah. It looks like it was designed by a developer because it was designed by a developer, and there's a lot of it that I'm unhappy with. It's sort of also kind of taken shape as different people have taken minor ownership of it and then moved on. That's something I do want to fix, in, like I said, 2025. That's something that I expect people to probably hear about Reactotron more in the future. So you're getting in a little early, like your listeners are getting in a little early before people are like, whoa, Reactotron, this new thing is really cool. And it's like, well, it's been around for years, it's done all this stuff, but it's going to look cooler. It's going to, that's my idea, is just, make it more useful.
I like it. That's the agenda 2025
Yeah.
for Reactotron. I'm
Yeah.
really looking forward. Honestly, I'm really looking forward to this, because it looks like it really still solves some problems. Okay, very, very cool. I will include this. So, moving on from all your open source contributions to something that's probably really relevant to people also in 2025, and that is job market,
Yeah.
the hiring process, being a React Native developer. Right now, we're still in 2024. I kind of feel it, because I see less signups for Galaxies, and that usually tells me the economy isn't too strong. Like, nobody's hiring junior developers anymore. Like, we have too many boot camps which pump out junior React developers, which, by the way, is a great chance to learn React Native, because then you stand out from the crowd, probably. But you have an agency, you have great React Native talent, and I would love to know, first of all, firsthand from you, like, how is your hiring process, if you can or want to talk about it, and what are you looking for in a good React Native developer right now, and also in like 2025 going forward?
Yeah. So we're a little different than a lot of other companies out there, especially consulting companies, where a lot of consulting companies really try to hire a broad range of experiences and then put together teams like a senior, intermediate, and a junior or something like that to put on projects. We are only seniors, and by senior I mean senior plus. Our average professional experience at Infinite Red is 15 years, and I think if you include leadership, it's more like 18. I've been doing it for 19 years, and I barely moved the average up. There's a lot of people at Infinite Red who have done it for 20 years and more. And the React Native experience is quite high too. I mean, it's over 5 years of average. And React Native's only been around for 9 years, and many
Right.
of the people have been here for 9. We also very much focus on our retention. We just rarely, lose people. People have been around for going back to my previous company and Todd's previous company, and etc. So because of that, and because we don't have massive growth goals, we don't hire very often. We don't lose people often. We don't hire very often. And when we do, we're really picky. We're really picky. We're really looking for fantastic people who want to be a part of what we're doing. We also only hire in the US and Canada, which makes it a little tougher because there's some amazing developers in Europe and elsewhere. But we have to, because of the size we are and whatnot, we have to kind of keep things simple. With that said, when we do our hiring, the first person that you really will talk to is actually our CEO. Usually a CEO is sort of like, if they are involved at all, they're at the end or something like that because they're busy, whatnot. We, because of our hiring process, we really want the culture fit, and to know, like, is this gonna be very, very like the type of person we want at Infinite Red, because every person changes the culture. Then second person, you're probably going to be talking to Gant, who's another owner. You're going to be talking to me at some point in the process, and you're going to be talking to you're going to be doing tech interviews with like one of our most senior developers, who has gotten rave reviews on his tech like pairing session like interviews, even from people who we don't hire. Like, people will come back to us and say, that was amazing, he did an amazing job. And one of the things that we do is we ask you to self-evaluate before we interview you. So we're not coming in and asking, let's say that you say that you're like, okay at TypeScript. We're not going to come in and ask you like the top most like incredible TypeScript questions, because that's not what you said you were. We're going to evaluate, are you where you said you were? Then we're going to look at that and say, is that what we need? Like, is it accurate, and is it what we need? So that's, I think, a difference as well, because a lot of the interview processes are, you come in and they ask you all the top, like, most difficult questions to figure out which ones you can hit. And we're only going to be like, where do you think you are? And then interview, was that accurate? Sometimes people underreport. I don't recommend that. Like, just try to say where you are. That's the best. Because underreporting in some ways is almost a negative signal. Like, say where you are as close as you can. And we also understand that people are interviewing us as much as we're interviewing them. We don't want someone to come to us and then be like, this isn't what I thought it was. So we try to introduce the culture in different ways. We try to introduce them to how we work, how we think about things, what we find important, what our values are, what our all that stuff very early in the process, so that they can self-select out. You don't want to work here if you're not going to like our culture. We don't want you to work here if you're not going to like our culture. We want to have people who come in who absolutely love our culture. Tyler, for example, interviewed like 4 years ago, and actually the first time ended up like not quite making it on the tech side because he didn't have enough React Native experience, even though he's a great developer. Came back 4 years later with 4 more years of React Native development, and we were like, this guy's great, but he said that during that whole time he was thinking like, this is the culture I want to be in. So we very much think of it like, we're setting up a relationship that hopefully will be many, many years. And when someone spends, we just had our team retreat a few weeks ago, and we gave out these pins for like each year that you're there. We had so many pins for people that have been with the company for 10 years.
That's unusual.
Yeah, we're only 9 years old, but they've been since
You're
like
cheating.
the first companies. And so like when they came through, like we keep that seniority, and we had so many people. I think it was 10 people with 10 years. that's amazing for a company of 30. And I don't take someone spending a decade of their life and of their career working for me, working with me. I don't take that for granted. That's a really important thing. And I want people to want to do that. I want to build a company that people would want to retire at. And that's really hard in tech. Like there's so many
Absolutely.
other interesting things to do.
Yeah.
It's hard for me. Like I have other interesting things I want to do, but I want to like build Infinite Red to work for me for the rest of my career. In order to do that, we have to make some trade-offs and make sure that we have the right people involved. So that's sort of the hiring process. And when we do hire, we invest in them, to make sure that they, come in with a good understanding of our culture, of our inside jokes. Even like you should know what our inside jokes are. We don't want you to feel
Just
left
listen
out.
to all the React Native radio episodes.
React Native Radio is a great place to recruit because people do understand our culture more, and they've sat and listened to me and Robin and Maz and talk about this stuff for
like the mom jokes
so
and
much.
everything else. Yeah,
All that stuff. It's like it's such a great place to find people.
Yeah, it's funny. I in the past told people the same whenever like my friends were excited about a job interview. I'm like, it's a two-sided thing. Like you as like the boss of Infinite, you want something as well. You want that person to work for you. You want the hours. It's not just you. It's two-sided. So
absolutely.
It's definitely something everyone should remember. But there's something interesting. You said like I forgot the name, the developer who applied and then 4 years later came back because Tyler. So he didn't have enough React Native skills initially. So what should all React Native developers have in terms of their skills? Like if we talk about the medium level developer, a React Native developer, why didn't he have enough, and why did he then have enough? So what are these like skills you are looking for, especially related to React Native?
Yeah, I think for Tyler, it was just a number of years. So he had only been doing React Native for I think 1 or 2 years, something like that. And our clients expect us to come in as experts who have been doing this for a long time. So what he needed was 4 more years of working, and doing what he was doing. And when he came back, now he has a lot of experience, many years, and he just has more confidence. And I can put him on a project, and he's going to do super well. But in terms of the actual experience or the actual like skills that you might want to have, obviously the React part of it, making sure that you understand React and all of the React APIs and how they work. You should have some basic understanding or good understanding, I think, of what affects performance in React and React Native projects, which often comes back to state and how you're handling state. Not always, but that is a big part of it. You should understand sort of like the model of how React Native works, how it talks to the native side. You don't have to necessarily know the native side, but understand what it's doing under the hood, like why it's generating like UI views and whatnot. I think you should have a decent exposure to different state management systems and a good understanding of TypeScript. You just can't get away from it these days. You should be pretty good at styling, stuff like that. I don't know, like off the top of my head, I'm sure I could go find a big list. We actually have a big list of skills that our developers. It's kind of interesting. So we actually do a survey every year. Robin, our director of engineering, does a survey every year asking people to self-evaluate themselves on a number of skills, and those skills are actually developed by our developers, suggested by our developers. Sort of like state of React Native, but for us internally.
State of Infinite Red.
Infinite Red, right? And the purpose of the self-evaluation is not for us to evaluate them. It's actually for us to get a baseline and then see where we're making the most progress and know where to invest in training. Because it's like, oh, everybody's saying that they're not great at native wind. And then they also, it's not just that they rate, how good they are, they also rate how important it is. So they're saying native wind's super important and they don't know it. Okay, well, let's do some native wind, workshops and things like that to bring people's confidence level up. So yeah, I mean, some of that stuff I could probably at some point open source, let people know what those things are and how, there should be ways to kind of level up in all these things.
Yeah, I think that's pretty cool. You should definitely
Mm-hmm.
open source that so people can self-evaluate them. Just like, yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes the problem is you don't know what you don't know. But if I get like
Right.
the questions and then there's like, how good are you at debugging? And I'm like, maybe I'm like a 6, but maybe I could be a 10. So what do I have to do to get like be a 10
Yeah.
in debugging? That would
Yeah.
be
Well,
super cool.
we kind of have that. So we have a 1 through 5, and 1 would be haven't ever done it. 2 would be like, I know the basics. 3 would be like, I'm all right. Like I use it, 4 is like, I'm pretty comfortable. I feel like I'm, I have everything I need basically. And 5 is like, I could teach this stuff, like I'm pretty dialed on that. I'm like an expert. And what we find is some people are maybe a little overconfident and some people are underconfident. Again, we prefer accuracy. Like, where do you think you are? But yeah, that's kind of how we look at it. It's purely there's like, what's your comfort level and what can you do? Yeah.
That's pretty cool. I found a quote from you. I think it's from you. I don't know where I picked it up, but I think you were talking about like promoting your company, and you said something around like open source work, conference talks, and content is really important. I think it was you. Do you think like the same is also true for individuals?
It depends on what your goals are.
Getting a job. I mean, we all know that getting a job at Infinite Red is like getting a job at Apple. It's pretty hard.
Yeah, maybe. And we hire less often, so maybe even harder. I don't know, but it depends on what your goals are. I would say that having a network is super, super, super important, and you can get a network through doing content for sure. Like, I know you through your content. Like that's right. How you kind of came up on my radar. I guess we were connected on Twitter as well, but I think social media, especially Twitter, maybe Blue Sky, if you want to go that direction. Blue Sky is starting to gain a relatively solid React Native community, which is nice because it is a React Native app. So, if you don't like Twitter, Blue Sky, not bad alternative. I'm on both. And I think that most people probably don't need to do a ton of content. What you probably do need to do is know some people who do content, or know some people with big networks who are friendly to you. Because as an example, I've put out, kind of an invitation. If you're looking for a job, send me a DM. I'm happy to boost it. Within reason, like if I got 5 a day, I'm not going to spam my people with that. But if I get like 1 a week, like that's not a big deal. I'll retweet it. I'll boost it. So I've also, if people are looking for a job, that is their job, in my opinion. Like, you should be putting as many hours as you can into the process of getting the job. And I find that a lot of people that struggle with finding jobs are really not putting in the amount of time they need to. That's not universally true, but it does happen. And a lot of it is also iterating, like making sure that you're asking people, what do you think is missing from my search? Sometimes it's just getting in front of the right people, and that's important. So you need to be out there DMing people and saying, hey, I'm looking for this, and I would love for you to keep your eye out. But do it in a way. I get DMs of people like, hey, give me a job. It's like, really, dude? Like, really? Like, could you be less effort here? Like, I do have I have a blog article, how to get a job from a tweet. And that one I think it's a little bit of an older one. But I think that there's some good advice in there as well.
Yeah, I know these tweets and the messages, and it just happens. Yeah.
Yep.
But it's a good reminder for everyone, like to just be a bit more active. You don't have to like create YouTube videos or dance on TikTok to get a job at Infinite Red, but just stay active and
most of our
be
people,
involved.
most of our people don't have like big audiences and whatnot. But
and by the way, the funny thing about Blue Sky, actually two funny things. So the first is I asked myself as well, like 2 days ago, everyone again posted like I'm now on Blue Sky, and that happened like a couple of months ago as well. And I'm like, okay, we all tried it, then we all agreed that it's not working out, and now we're trying it again. Like, I'm not completely sure about it. I think, but on the same note, the next podcast will actually be with Samuel, who's an engineer at Blue Sky.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. From my standpoint, their biggest issue is primarily just getting a critical mass of people, so that like on Threads, if I go to Threads and post something about React Native, I get zero interaction, like nothing.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to keep posting then. Like that. Why would I be there? If I post something about React Native on Blue Sky, well, a year ago, if I post something about React Native on Blue Sky, I would get a little bit. But now if I do it, I'll probably get 20 likes. It's not Twitter level. I get like 100 on Twitter, but like still pretty decent. And people are, engaging and replying. And when I'm looking at the feed, it's not just people complaining about Twitter. It's actually people talking tech a bit. So I think it's just a slow burn. I'm not saying it's going to replace Twitter, at least for me. But it is an alternative place to post some things. And certainly if you're tired of Twitter, give it a shot. I think it's fine.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting. So like 2 days ago, I started posting. I have currently like 300 followers on Blue Sky compared to like something with 10K or so on Twitter.
Right. Yeah.
But I posted something about React Native, like the new debugging on Blue Sky. And it was like 33 likes and 7 retweets and 7 comments. And that's quite a lot for that's 10% of my following in terms of engagement, and even more. Yeah. I'm not getting that on Twitter. Definitely not.
Right. Absolutely. No, it's because people are hungry for good content.
I will try to be more active on Blue Sky in the future.
I forget about it. I forget about it, and then I come in, and I apparently you get notifications for every like, which I don't really like. So I came in with 127 notifications, that's a little ridiculous, but it actually wasn't much. It was just like, 80 people liked that thing or something. And then, that was it. So,
my only problem is over the last time I also picked up posting on LinkedIn. So now I have a tab open with Twitter or X. I have Blue Sky open. I have LinkedIn open. I also keep an eye on YouTube, and that's actually really the danger of my work right now, trailing off a bit, but you can easily go to all 4 tabs, or maybe 5. I have YouTube as well. And once you're done, you start again in the beginning, because there's something, there's a new notification, and then suddenly it's like 45 minutes, and I'm like, I wanted to work on that Cologne app. Why am I here?
I 100% understand. Yeah. In some ways it's good that my job isn't reliant on me, like sitting being productive every day, because I do get these distractions. I think they're useful, for me to do networking, but for most people, that's not really the case. I would probably recommend you more or less, pick one to kind of main, like this is the one I'm really on more. And then the others you check in, once a week or so, and just make sure that you kind of keep them alive a little bit. I have this little secret. Not going to say this elsewhere. On Blue Sky, one of my strategies is I'll go look at old tweet. I'll do a search for old tweets that did well on Twitter, and I'll just post them on Blue Sky, because I know that most of them haven't seen them. I'm only ripping off myself. I posted them originally, and I know they did well on Twitter. So it's like, okay, Blue Sky is where Twitter was a while ago. Okay, I'll use those tweets to kind of build my audience there. That's a little bit of a hack, just because,
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
To
But
be
it's
honest,
been working.
my post on Blue Sky that did well was from 3 days ago from Twitter. I just copied it. I was too lazy to write something new,
and that's totally fine. Yeah, I'm trying to do something where it's not just a mirror of Twitter. Like it's older Twitter for me, so you're getting content you haven't seen if you're on both. But yeah, totally makes sense.
Also, for all indie hackers listening, I'm using a tool to schedule my tweets for Twitter and LinkedIn, but there's not yet a tool for scheduling on Blue Sky.
Yeah.
Someone should maybe build it.
Yeah.
In the past, I would have taken it on, but I know that my time is so limited. I'm already like,
can't do it all.
What did Bilbo say? I feel like butter stretched on too much bread or something. It's like,
I love that.
yeah, I can't take on another project.
That's me.
Okay, Jamon, we are already a bit over time, but that's not preventing me from my last question about the future. Looking into the future, we already talked about Reactotron again in 2025 is going to be epic. Ignite is getting better all the time, of course. But from your point of perspective, what are you most excited about in the React Native world? For me, it's like stuff like RSC, debugging, getting better, styling. But what are like the big things that are you really looking forward to over the next time?
I think moving into new architecture by default is super important. Like we'll actually be able to move on finally after all these years. I think 1.0 is on the horizon.
Is it really?
I really hope so, but I think so.
That would be a great signal to like
I know
the world.
Yeah, I know, right? Like it's just this perpetual 0 point. But like I think it's on the horizon. I think we're going to end up there. We had a pretty good conversation about it in Poland with the core team, and such a kind of dumb thing to kind of get hung up on, but there's a lot of different people with differing opinions on this. There's some people who are all just straight up like fanatical Semver, like only Semver, we have to do Semver, and they have good reasons for that. And then you have others who are more like it's more marketing and we should be thinking about it as marketing. I tend to be more on that side. And there's others that are kind of hybrids of that and different things. So, but I think 1.0. And then I think also, I think just the rise of Expo and React Native frameworks is going to clarify a lot of things and help us kind of, just it'll be the new way that you build apps. It already is pretty much at this point. So those things, and then debugger. Like we need better debugging tools, and when those are like ready to go and really kind of well supported and people understand them. Yeah, I don't know. It feels like React Native's well positioned. I bet my company on it, and that's a little scary.
I mean, my whole existence is also about React Native at this point.
Both of us, Simon, have pivoted in the past, but it's painful. It's painful to pivot, and neither of us want to have to do that if we don't have to.
No, I'm happy if React Native stays around for a couple of years. Although I don't know what's going on with AI and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, AI is going to have an impact for sure. I mean, if we're looking beyond next year, in my opinion, the biggest potential threat to React Native would be writing it in plain English and then generating an app from that. And I've said that for years now. Like that's I think coming. With that said, React Native is a pretty good AI target. Like you can like generate a React Native app from your plain English. And for now, I think for many years, I think that's going to be a better option than generating two native apps from your plain English. But I do think eventually that will be doable to generate two native apps or many different platforms from plain English. I don't think that you can completely discount that based on just what you see with current gen AI, because eventually that's going to change. So we're keeping an eye on that. But if that happens, then everybody is going to be, kind of, there'll be some turmoil at that point, probably. Man, that sounds really negative. I don't see it as negative. I don't really, because like who's writing the English instructions. It's going to be us. Like
Yeah.
normal users aren't going to really be doing stuff like that. It's still going to be us. We understand software way better. We're still going to have jobs. There's plenty of software that needs to be written. I mean, Simon, you're just talking about something that needs to be built. Like there's so much in front of us. We've barely scratched the surface. We've done 2% of what needs to be done. Like AI is just going to help us take a bigger bite out of it, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm curious because my daughter is now 6, and I was thinking like when she enters the job market, let's say in like 12 to 15 years, um, what is the world like at that point? Is she still writing React Native like I am? I'm pretty sure that she's not. So that kind of limits our like span of good React Native years to a maximum of 12 to 15 years starting today, which makes me, I mean, it makes me a bit sad, but I mean, there'll
Yeah.
be new stuff at that point. But
Yeah.
it could be that we have like 5 to 10 good years of of writing React Native, and then things slowly start to change.
Yeah. No, you're right. I think there's a lot of truth to that. Boy, this could be a whole episode itself. My son just started his career. He's 19. He started last year, and he's using AI every day to build the stuff that he needs to build.
Yeah.
And he's doing it in a way that I think is like a lot of people are worried about, like juniors, you know, how they'll use AI and crappy code and stuff like that. The way my son Cedric approaches using AI is really good. He wants to know how it's working. He'll ask the AI, what is this doing? What's this doing? What's this doing? He'll be like very, very specific about it. And then when he knows how it works, then he'll ship it. A lot of juniors will just ship stuff without doing that. But I think that those who take that approach will do just fine in the future.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, again, we could probably do a whole AI episode
Yeah.
in the future. Maybe we do this in 2025. Would be fun.
Yeah, it'd be fun.
But to end this on a good note, the last topic that's also super popular right now is universal applications, and I think this is also something for the future. But I feel like there are two sides to this. Many people say like, yeah, we have to go universal. This is great, and Expo Web, and you can use Tamagui and all these things. But then there's also like a part of people that say React like native is different from web. Please stay calm. That's also what Theo told me. Like, native is still different, like the navigation patterns and stuff we got in mobile apps. So to wrap it up, what are your thoughts about like this whole universal trend? Because there is definitely a universal trend. Everything that's going on with Expo Router is kind of made so we can like build web and native apps with it, right?
I think the universal part should be convergence and alignment of the tools that we're using, and less so the UI patterns that we're using. Because maybe we could use Expo Router to build a website and to build an iOS app and to build an Android app and to build a TV app and things like that. But use it in a way that is that feels native to the platform, that aligns with the user's expectations and all of those things. Don't expect to apply that across. In fact, this is one of the problems we've had for years with designers, because you'll have a designer come in and say, I know how to design for mobile. And we say, okay, mobile apps, right? Not mobile web. Those are two different things. Oh no, I've done tons of mobile web. It's like, okay, well, we know where we're getting then. You know, it's not going to be great. And they're good designers. Like for web, they're just amazing, but they don't understand the paradigms that that mobile app users expect. And so mobile designers are like very, very, they're very valuable for these types of projects. I see this as similar, where if you like, you can use the same tool to make a mobile app, sorry, a mobile or a mobile web design and a mobile app design. But, you know, like use the same tool. It's fine. It's nice to know one tool that can do both, but understand that there's differences there. And I think that's the same for programmers. We need to have tools that we can use for both. We use TypeScript for both. We use JavaScript for both. We use Prettier for both. We have all these tools that apply to both now. That's great. That's awesome. Maybe navigation might or might not be one of those things, but I mean, React, we use that for both. We like, you can just kind of keep going, and the convergence of the APIs is a good thing. The convergence of the UI patterns, that's not going to serve either. you need to make sure that you are thinking about the user experience at the end of the day. So convergence, great of tools, but the UI, really think through what the user expectations are.
That sounds really like a great point about it. I'm really looking forward to this like React Strict DOM. That was a super interesting approach, and I'm curious to see where this goes. So a lot of interesting things coming up. Jamon, this was probably the longest podcast episode here on Rocket Ship, but it also at the same time felt like the shortest. I had such a fun episode with you talking about all these different topics.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for taking the time. Just to wrap it up, where can find people more about you? Where can they reach you? Where can they get a job at Infinite Red? What do they have to do?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on Twitter at Jamon Holmgren, on Blue Sky at jamon.dev. That's my personal website, jamon.dev. You can email me, jamon at infinite.red. Our website is infinite.red. Not currently hiring, but that could change. Keep an eye on React Native Radio. Go to reactnativeradio.com. That's often where we will say, hey, we opened it up for a bit, and people can jump in. Just connect. If I on any of these platforms, if I have a pleasant interaction with someone, most of the time I'm going to, and they follow me, like most of the time I'm going to follow them back. Like I follow 3,000 some people. I find some of my best connections with people with 800 followers. It's or less. It's fine. I'm not looking to only be in this kind of I love learning from people and the connections and those types of things. So feel free to interact and connect. That's what I'm looking for.
That definitely shines through. So thanks for taking the time, and I'm looking forward to our conversation in 2025 about Reactotron and all the new UI updates.
Thanks so much for having me on, Simon. This is a lot of fun.
Bye. Thanks for joining today's episode. My goal is to share interesting stories and insights into the world of React Native development. If you enjoy this show, please subscribe to the show on YouTube, Apple, or Spotify. And on Spotify and Apple, you can leave up to a 5-star review. Because podcasts, and especially niche podcasts like this, are hard to find, subscribing and leaving a review does help me a lot. On top of that, check out my React Native courses on galaxies.dev that cover a variety of topics from getting started to building and publishing your mobile app. Finally, you can share today's episode with a friend or colleague who would enjoy the topic of the show. If you have any questions or ideas for future episodes, find me on X or leave a comment on YouTube. And last but not least, thank you for listening and happy coding, Simon.